Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Taylor sat in the silence of her living room, the subtle hum of Los Angeles evening traffic drifting through the open window. The Forrester estate, which is typically a source of comfort and familiarity, felt heavy tonight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Her hands trembled as she gripped a glass of water, the condensation pouring on her lap undetected. Ridge sat across from her on the soft cream sofa, his brow furrowed, his gaze searching her face for answers she wasn't certain she could provide. The weight of the truth she'd been hiding for decades weighed against her chest, a secret so colossal that it threatened to destroy everything they'd achieved. "Taylor, what is happening?" Ridge's voice was kind but forceful, the tone he used when he suspected something was seriously wrong. His dark, observant gaze focused upon hers. "You've been distant this week. Talk to me." She swallowed forcefully, her throat dry despite the water in her fingers. The phrases she had practiced 1,000 times in her head felt like shards of glass now, each one hurting deeper as she prepared to pronounce them. This wasn't just about her or Ridge. It was about their daughter, Steffi. Or more specifically, Ridge felt she was his daughter. The truth was that the wound had been festering for too long, and it would bleed tonight. "Ridge," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I have something to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." Her fingers gripped the glass, the coolness grounding her as her heart raced. "It's about Steffi." Ridge's posture tensed, his hands resting on his knees and leaning forward slightly. "Steffi, how about her?" His voice had taken on a more protective tone. Steffi was his pride, his fiery, smart daughter who embodied the Forrester name with unrivaled strength. The prospect of anything endangering her frightened him noticeably. Taylor placed the glass on the coffee table with careful movements, gaining time. She couldn't look at him yet. Instead, she concentrated on the intricate pattern of the rug beneath her feet, tracing the swirls with her eyes as if they could guide her through the situation. "Ridge," she whispered again. "Steffi, she's not your biological daughter." The stillness was deafening after that. Ridge could not move or speak, but Taylor could sense the astonishment emanating from him, a physical force that filled the room. She forced herself to meet his gaze, and what she saw nearly destroyed her. Confusion, hurt, and a glint of incredulity danced in his eyes, each vying for control. "What are you talking about?" He eventually spoke, his voice low and almost menacing. "That isn't feasible, Taylor. Steffi is ours. You and I. We reared her." Taylor's eyes welled up with tears, which she blinked back, reluctant to let fall just yet. "I understand what you're thinking, Ridge. I understand this doesn't make sense. But please allow me to explain." She drew a nervous breath, her hands twisting together in her lap. "When I found out I was pregnant with Steffi, we were in a difficult situation. You were still involved with Brooke, and I was battling to cling on to what we had. I was afraid, Ridge." Ridge's jaw tightened, and he leaned back, crossing his arms to hide himself from what was about to happen. "Go on," he urged with a tight tone. Taylor's heart wrenched at the distance that had already formed between them, but she persisted. "I wasn't sure I could keep you with Brooke constantly pushing you back. I made a mistake. A terrible, awful error." Her voice broke, and she paused to steady herself. "I was in Monaco for a conference, and I felt so lonely and disoriented. I met a doctor with whom I had a brief working relationship. It was just one night, Ridge. One dumb and reckless night." Ridge's face turned pale and his hands dropped to his sides, as if the weight of her words had physically impacted him. "Are you telling me you slept with someone else? And Steffi?" His voice trailed off as the knowledge set him. Taylor nodded, her emotions finally spilling out. "I wasn't sure at first. I hoped and prayed God that she was yours. But just to be sure, I had a paternity test done after she was born. And the results." She sobbed, covering her lips with her hand. "She was not yours, Ridge. She's his." Ridge stood abruptly, his chair slapping the hardwood floor. He paced to the window, his back to her, his shoulders stiff from strain. "How could you keep this from me?" he demanded, his voice harsh. "All those years, Taylor. All these years I've loved her, raised her, and thought she was mine. And you made me believe that." "I know," Taylor muttered, her voice shaking. "I was terrified. I assumed that if I informed you, I would lose you forever. I believed it would destroy our family. Steffi was ours in every manner that mattered. And she still is. I couldn't handle the notion of you looking at her differently, or her feeling like she didn't belong." Ridge turned to face her, his eyes filled with rage and grief. "You did not get to make that decision for me, Taylor. Or for Steffi. She deserves to know who her father is. I deserved to know." His voice faltered and he rubbed his hair, his displeasure apparent. "Who is he?" "Doctor. Does he know?" Taylor shook her head. "Well, I never informed him." Ridge made a mistake, a moment of weakness. "He went back to his life and I returned to you. I believed I could conceal it, that it wouldn't matter if we were together. But it's been eating me alive every day." Ridge fell back into the sofa, head in his hands. The quiet between them was oppressive and crushing. Taylor wanted to reach out to him to repair the gap she'd caused, but she knew he needed time to comprehend this. She had wrecked his universe, and there was no undoing it. Finally he looked up, his eyes red but determined. "Does Steffi know?" he asked quietly. "No," Taylor said, her voice barely audible. "I could not bring myself to tell her. She adores you, Ridge. You are her father in every manner that counts. I didn't want to take that away from her." Ridge gave a slow nod, his expression impassive. "She needs to know," he explained after a long pause. "We cannot conceal this from her. Taylor is a powerful woman. She will manage it. But she deserves the truth." Taylor's heart fell. She had anticipated this moment, but the actuality was nearly too much to endure. "I know," she replied, her voice breaking. "But how will we tell her? How do I look at my daughter and tell her that the man she has always called Dad is not her real father?" Ridge's gaze softened for a brief time, and he reached out, hovering near hers before pulling back. "We'll tell her together," he explained. "She'll be angry and hurt. But she is a Forrester. She will get over this. And I—" He paused, his voice full with emotion. "I will always be her father, Taylor. No test can change that." Taylor's eyes welled up with tears as she nodded, thankful for his words but afraid of what was ahead. The notion of confronting Steffi and seeing the betrayal in her eyes was almost painful. But Ridge was correct. Steffi deserved the truth, no matter how unpleasant. The following day, they summoned Steffi to the estate.
She arrived with her customary assurance, her dark hair pushed back and her eyes piercing and eager. "What is this about?" she inquired, looking between her parents. Taylor's stomach churned as she motioned for Steffi to sit down. Ridge stood by the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back and his face a mask of stern determination. Taylor took a deep breath, her hands quivering as she started. "Steffi, we have something to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Steffi furrowed her brow, her attention shifting to Ridge, and then back to Taylor. "Okay, you're scaring me. What's happening?" Taylor's voice faltered as she told the narrative of the night in Monaco, the doubt, and the paternity test. Steffi's look changed with each syllable, from astonishment to shock to something deeper, which devastated Taylor's heart. When she finished, the room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Steffi looked at her mother, her eyes wide and shining with unshed tears. "So, Dad isn't my dad," she murmured, her voice tiny and almost infantile. Ridge moved forward, his voice steady but kind. "I'm your father, Steffi. I've always been your father, and I always will be. Nothing changes that." Steffi's gaze shifted to him, and Taylor had a glimpse of the little girl who used to seek solace from Ridge. Her countenance intensified, and she stood with her fists clenched. How could you have lied to me? She remarked, raising her voice as she turned to face Taylor. All these years, you let me believe. You let us all believe. She shook her head, her voice shaking. I don't even know who I am anymore. Steffi, please, Taylor begged, rising to grasp for her daughter. Steffi stepped back, her eyes flaming with pain. I need to get out of here, Steffi murmured, her voice cracking. I can't do this right now. She grabbed her bag and started toward the door, pausing briefly to stare at Ridge. I apologize, Dad. Taylor sobbed when the door shut behind her. Ridge stood immobile, his mouth clenched and his gaze remote. The truth had been told, but at what cost? Their once close-knit family now felt fragmented, the fragments scattered by a long-held secret. Steffi avoided them both in the days that followed, withdrawing into her own world to process the discovery. Taylor attempted to contact out, sending voicemails that remained unanswered and texts that were read but ignored. Each stillness was a stab in her heart, a reminder of the anguish she had caused. Ridge, too, struggled, his customary confidence disturbed as he contemplated his role in Steffi's life. He loved her intensely, but the fact that she wasn't his by blood gnawed at him, even as he tried to keep the bond they'd formed. Taylor's phone buzzed one evening when she sat alone in her office, staring at a photo of Steffi as a toddler. Steffi texted, I'm not ready to talk, but I'm okay. I just need to figure things out on my own for a time. Taylor gripped the phone to her chest, tears running down her cheeks. It wasn't forgiveness just yet, but it was a glimmer of hope. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult and painful, but she also understood Steffi's fortitude. If anyone could make it through this, it was her kid. Taylor and Ridge's relationship was unstable. The trust they'd built up over the years was damaged, and while Ridge's love for Steffi remained unshakable, betrayal muddled his feelings for Taylor. They proceeded cautiously through their days, each dealing with their own shame and anguish. The Forrester family, once a symbol of unity, was now divided by truth. But in the quiet moments, when Taylor closed her eyes and saw Steffi's grin, she hung on to the hope that love, the love they'd all had for so long, could one day restore what had been broken. It would be difficult and time-consuming, but it was a worthwhile goal. Taylor's voice quivered as she greeted him, and Ridge became concerned. He asked her what was wrong, if something had happened to Steffi or Thomas. The names of their children were always the first to come to mind, because no matter what happened in their relationship, their children remained at the heart of their link. Taylor hesitated, her lips separating and closing as if the words would not come out. Ridge leaned out and gently held her arm, encouraging her to talk. He was aware that whatever she was struggling to say was huge. Finally, with tears in her eyes, Taylor murmured that there was something she had kept from him for years, something that would change everything he thought he knew about his family. Ridge frowned, perplexity on his face. He urged her for an explanation, but she stumbled again, pacing the room and wringing her hands. She talked about mistakes and secrets that had been buried deep because the truth was too frightening and terrible to expose. Ridge, becoming increasingly agitated and concerned, warned her that nothing could be worse than quiet. He wanted to know what was troubling her so badly. Taylor finally stopped moving, stood in front of him, and delivered the words that shook him to the core. Steffi was not his legitimate daughter. The room seemed to freeze around them. Ridge's eyes widened, and his breath caught in his throat as if the air itself had been taken away from him. He glanced at Taylor, unable to comprehend what he'd just heard. He asked her to repeat it in case he had misunderstood. But Taylor's sobbing confirmation left little doubt. She admitted that at a difficult period in their relationship, she made a mistake. One night that altered the direction of events. She had been vulnerable in pain and in the arms of another person. The result was Steffi. She had convinced herself for years that Ridge was the father, and on paper, he always was. Taylor had long suspected that another man could be Steffi's biological father. Ridge was astonished, with wrath and sadness crashing in his chest. He demanded to know how Taylor could have hidden this from him for so long, and how she could have allowed him to raise Steffi as if she were his kid. His voice raised, quivering with betrayal, and his eyes were filled with the kind of sorrow that only someone who had been duped by the one they trusted the most could feel. Taylor attempted to clarify that it had not been malicious. She wanted to protect him and his family. She was scared of damaging the life they had created, and as the years went, the deception became heavier and more difficult to confess. She stated she loved both him and Steffi, and she couldn't face the thought of breaking their link. Ridge, however, was inconsolable. The realization that the daughter he had treasured, guided, and protected might not actually be his sent shockwaves through him. Steffi's childhood memories rushed before his eyes, including her first steps and words, as well as the times he had been present for her successes and grief. He had loved her unreservedly and never doubted that she was a part of him. And now, the cornerstone of that love felt taken, warped by a secret Taylor had kept hidden for decades. He couldn't understand how Taylor could have allowed him to live a lie, knowing the truth would eventually come out. Taylor encouraged him to listen and comprehend that biology did not remove his bond with Steffi. She reminded him that, regardless of blood, he was the father in every way that counted. Ridge retaliated, claiming that it was not her decision to decide for him. He deserved to know the truth from the start, not after years of deception. He asked who the true father was, his voice quivering with rage and grief. Taylor paused before revealing the name. Another man from her past, someone Ridge knew, whose presence in their lives would amplify the shock of the discovery. Ridge was deeply upset by the admission. The treachery was not just in the deception, but also in the identity of the guy who could possibly be Steffi's father. Every memory seems contaminated, every decision, every moment shrouded in uncertainty. Ridge stormed across the room, struggling with the enormity of the news. His heart wrenched for Steffi, who was completely innocent in all of this. She had no notion that the guy she called father might not actually be hers. Ridge was caught between his wrath at Taylor and his love for his daughter, unsure how to proceed. Taylor continued to beg, telling him that Steffi should never doubt his love and that she was still his daughter in every aspect that mattered. She argued that Ridge was her true father because he had been present every day of her life, as opposed to the man with whom she might share DNA. But Ridge couldn't get over the betrayal. His entire existence with Taylor felt rewritten in that instant, the love tale they had created eclipsed by the lies she had said. He questioned their marriage, their past, and all they stood for. Taylor sobbed, explaining that she had lived in fear of this exact moment, that she hated losing him but could no longer bear the burden of the secret. As the hours went, the discourse became increasingly raw and desperate. Ridge alternated between wrath and despair, while Taylor clung to him, pleading for forgiveness. He informed her that he didn't know if forgiveness was possible, especially after losing something so basic. He said that he still loved Steffi and that nothing could change the years they had spent together, but he couldn't deny the fact. He required time, space, and answers. He needed to confront what this meant for his relationships with Steffi and Taylor. The confession hung like a dark cloud over them both. Taylor sat broken, realizing she had damaged the guy she loved. Ridge stood at the window, looking out at the roaring waves, his world in shambles. He felt betrayed by both Taylor and fate itself. How could something so innocent, the link between a father and daughter, be called into doubt after so many years? He breathed Steffi's name to himself, torn between his undying love for her and the harsh realization that she might not share his blood. The quiet between them was oppressive, filled with ghosts of memories and echoes of what had just occurred. Ridge eventually turned to Taylor with steely eyes and a hushed voice. He assured her that nothing would ever be the same again. Trust had been destroyed, and once shattered, it was almost impossible to repair. He stated that he needed to give Steffi the truth, no matter how difficult it would be. Taylor begged him not to, stating it would shatter their daughter's world. But Ridge was unwavering. He couldn't go another day under the weight of lies. Ridge packed a bag as night fell and the home became darker. He informed Taylor that he couldn't remain because he needed time to think, breathe, and comprehend everything. Taylor implored him not to leave, but he walked away, his heart heavy and his world permanently changed. Ridge Forrester's life would never be the same. And for Taylor Hayes, the confession she had been dreading for decades had finally come true, bringing with it the potential of losing everything she had ever known. The truth had been revealed, and nothing could turn back time.